while it also spreads in places like New Caledonia and a lot of our other Melanesian nations. So with such a dividing subject, it's very important that we're able to dissect the facts from the fiction. So in saying that, I would proudly like to introduce all of you to our very own Melanesian experts in the field. First up, we have Dr. James Auto. He is a pediatrician from the Solomon Islands. He studied at the University of PNG and the University of Sydney. And over the course of his illustrious 24-year career, he has served in Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, Fiji, Vanuatu, and Nauru. Currently, Dr. Auto is working at the Colonial War Memorial Hospital in Fiji. And secondly, we got Dr. Caleb Vangana. He is also a pediatrician from the Solomon Islands, and he has attained his MBBS, DCH, MMED from the University of Papua New Guinea. And he has also humbly served for 20 years in many countries, including PNG, Vanuatu, and many hospitals in Australia, including the Sydney Children's Hospital and the Royal Women's Hospital. Currently, he is serving at Villa Central Hospital in Port Vila, Vanuatu. Before we begin, I'd like to, just let everyone know we'll have the opportunity to ask questions between some of the sessions. We'll let you know, and then at the very end, we'll have an extended opportunity for everyone to ask questions. So if you'd like to ask questions, just kindly raise your hand in the chat, or direct message myself or Margaret, the other co-host, and we'll facilitate that for you. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our first expert. Thank you.
So good evening, everybody. I'm so glad to have this opportunity to meet you all through this media and to talk a bit about the COVID disease, as well as then to move on to cover the vaccine. Dr. Vangana will be contributing a lot to that. So thank you very much. If we could have the next slide, I'll begin talking about the COVID disease. Perhaps as you have known, the COVID disease has been here with us for now going on the second year. And there's some estimates that it might be here for another year over the globe. Thank you. Let's see the next slide. This slide just gives us some information about the cause of this COVID-19. And the cause is coronavirus, which is called SARS-CoV-2 for short. SARS meaning severe acute respiratory syndrome, and the CoV meaning coronavirus, and it's the second type. Now, where do these coronaviruses come from, and what do they do? So, in fact, there are human coronaviruses which causes mild colds and mild illness, but a few of them cause severe disease. For example, in the past, we had 2 coronavirus disease in different parts of the globe. One was the Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, which is caused by a coronavirus, and 2, the SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome, again caused by a coronavirus. And these, therefore, we have some coronavirus, majority of them just causing mild illness, but a few causing severe disease. And this severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, which is the current new strain that we have now causing the pandemic around the globe. This is the cause of COVID-19 as the disease. So the viral particle is SARS-CoV-2 and the disease is COVID-19. Next slide. So this slide illustrates that the bat is the ecological host or the reservoir for the coronaviruses. And how did they come to be in human beings is that it is seen that the coronavirus cannot jump directly from the bat to humans, but it must come through an intermediate host. And usually these intermediate hosts are either animals which are in proximity to human beings, or humans use it either as food or in some other ways. So for this 2019 novel coronavirus, which is the same as SARS-CoV-2, we have not yet identified the intermediate host from which the coronavirus then entered from the bat through what intermediate host to the human being. We have not yet identified that. Next slide. If you look at the coronavirus itself, then you would see that its molecular structure consists of one casing which is on the outside. This is called the envelope. And on this envelope, you have the spike proteins, those red spikes kind of sticking out from the envelope. So that forms the outside casing of the coronavirus. And within that coronavirus resides the genetic material, which is an RNA. So as you may have known through reading of some science textbooks, the genetic material within living things consists of two types of nucleic acids. One is called DNA and the other called RNA. So in these coronaviruses, there is the RNA. Next slide. The disease, as you may have known through, we all experienced this. There were reports coming out of China in December 2019. There were some unofficial reports coming through popular news there, the South China Morning Herald, which probably showed some reports from November. But from December 2019, there was this rise of a pneumonia, type of pneumonia cases within China, which the doctors were reporting. And then by January, China announced that a new virus is causing this pneumonia, which was named SARS-CoV-2. And then they reported the first death. And then the WHO became concerned that once the disease was also reported in Thailand, that this is a virus of international concern. And then through to February and March and then April, we begin to confirm that indeed this coronavirus, which had started there in China, in the city of Wuhan, has spread to many cities over the globe and was causing the similar type of respiratory or pneumonia disease in people around the world. Next slide. So over time, from then till about June, the cases rapidly increased worldwide. Next slide. Yes, so This slide illustrates the current situation. This is just on the 7th of September, just a couple of days ago. And it illustrates only our region, which is called the Western Pacific region. And that covers the islands of the Pacific, the two larger metropolitan centers, New Zealand, Australia, through the Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, and through Southeast Asia up through to Cambodia, China. So that constitutes the Western Pacific region. And if you can just see quickly, total confirmed cases within this Western Pacific region is 7 million. 7 million. And total deaths confirmed, which are deaths from COVID, is just over 96,000. So that's a large number. And if you can just go to the next slide. I'll just show you, like, coming closer to home, which is where I work. This is the data from Fiji in 2020 to this year, 2021. And the curve here, the yellow curve and the red curve, illustrates the number of cases from 2020 and also the number of deaths from 2020. So from 2020, we had like just a baseline quarantine cases, which we quarantined at the border and ensured that they are clear before they are let back into their homes, into the community. So these are travelers from India, Fijian citizens coming back from the States, coming back from nearby metropolitan Australia, New Zealand. And so we quarantined them at the border. So we have this like small baseline of cases, then which by April this year, we begin to increasingly see a rise in the number of cases. And as you can see, the rise is quite steep. And correspondingly, the deaths are also rising rapidly. So we've had since this, since April, up to about 50,000 cases in Fiji and up to about 500 deaths within this time, short period from April. So what this illustrates is that once the disease enters the community from your quarantine facilities, there is this rapid spread of the disease. Because this coronavirus is about 2 to 5 times more infective or transmissible than the say measles is 20 times transmissible. This one is 2 to 5 times, and the prior SARS-CoV-1 was like 1.5 times transmissibility. So this is quite contagious, this virus. Next slide. Okay, so just to show you, this is again from just 2 days ago. The majority of the cases in our region is from Fiji, Australia, and Tahiti, Papua New Guinea. But I want to also highlight there, the Solomons already had 20 cases. It had 20 cases. So there is no there is no called to be complacent. This means that the virus did reach the source of the Solomon Islands. And if it did reach there, and if future transmission can occur, it means there is a potential for the community to contract the virus. Thanks. Next slide. The new coronavirus causes disease by attachment to a receptor in all our cells, which is already there. And this is called a type 2 type 2 angiotensin converting enzyme 2 receptor. Now, this receptor is highest in the lungs, the alveolar cells, or the bronchial tree, the tongue, also in the heart muscles, in the intestines, in the kidney, or the bladder. So what this means is SARS-CoV-2 can bind to any of these organs which express the receptor, the angiotensin ACE2, angiotensin converting enzyme 2 receptor. So all these organs, the lungs, the bronchial tree, the tongue, the intestines, the heart, myocardial cells, the kidney, the bladder, because all these have the receptor, therefore there is potential for disease in those organs once the virus enters the body. Next slide. This slide just illustrates that through a cascade of events, this leads to a rise of acute respiratory distress syndrome in adults. So at that stage, you need basically intensive care unit. You should be cared there once you've reached this stage. And also the mortality from this ARDS is quite high. And many of our countries don't have enough ICU beds, ICU equipment to cater for a rise in the number of severe respiratory diseases. It means like if there's one ventilator and 10 of us have severe respiratory distress, then one of us will have that one ventilator and 9 of us is just as good as dead. And that one who's having the ventilator might also succumb. So that's how much we need to think about it, not just the disease itself, but the lack of resources within our nation states to deal with this severe disease. Next. We were thinking that the COVID, after the acute illness, it's gone, you've recovered. But actually, there is this observation that over a longer period after you've recovered from the initial COVID disease, these symptoms can linger on. And it's called a post-COVID disease, sometimes called a long-term illness. And people feel tired, headaches, chest pains, muscle aches, may have abdominal pains, may have feel depressed, forgetful. All these symptoms linger on beyond the COVID disease, which you may have recovered from, but these long-term symptoms persist. Next slide. So a bit about like, why do we do quarantine? Why do we ask you to wear some protective equipment, masks? Is that we aim to reduce that high spike at the beginning. Can you see that? The one in gray or So if there was none of these social distancing, quarantine, isolation, masking done, then we have a steep rise within the severe cases, and it will just overwhelm the, for instance, in this case, the intensive care unit beds available. But if we practice the other things as well within community, we might reduce the rise in the cases. Next case, next slide. Okay, so then we have things like we ask you to wash hands, we ask you to wear the mask, we ask you to distance. These are ways which you as individual and us together as a community can practice in order to like curtail or reduce the transmission of this very highly infective virus. Thank you.
Okay, good night, everyone. I'm so privileged to be here with you, and it's so nice to be part of this team in this session. My talk will be mainly on immunity and the different types of vaccines, what's in the vaccine and how they are approved before they are being used. Next slide. Okay, some basic vaccination principles. I'll start off by talking about the different defense mechanism of the human body. There are basically two main systems: the innate immunity and the adaptive immunity. So with regards to the innate immunity, these are the natural barriers that our body have, starting off with the biggest organ of the body, which is the skin. And you also have the mucous membranes and the cilia of the throat, and also the lining of the gut as well. And you have some the normal common cells within these first line barriers, like bacteria, which normal bacteria or normal common cells you have in the throat, and of course in the lining of the intestine. So they compete against the invading organisms so that they don't take the upper hand and cause people to get sick. So those are our innate immunity. And then you have the second group, which is called the adaptive immunity. And there are two different components for this one. You have the humoral immunity and the cell-mediated immunity. With regards to system that actually produce the different antibodies, and there are 5 of them. And the B cells are the main cells that produce this or activated to produce these different antibodies. So there's IgA, IgG, Ig, and IgM. Those are the 5 different antibodies that we have in our system. And then you have the cell-mediated immunity, which is mainly the cell involved here, the T cells. And these are the ones that eventually, when they are triggered or activated, they produce the effector cells as well as the memory cells. And these vaccines, they stimulate all these defense mechanisms which work together. As a result, they produce these effector cells and also the antibodies against the disease that the vaccine is developed against. Next slide, please. So these are the different types of vaccines that are used worldwide. And in the area of pediatrics, which I'm specialized in, we always advocate for vaccination or vaccinating our kids. We have the live vaccines. These vaccines are actually part of the live, the organism itself. It's live, but at a safe level, which doesn't really cause severe illness in a human subject. So when they are injected into the human subject, they activate this the three different immune systems that we have, the innate immunity, and of course both the humoral and the cell-mediated immune system. And they produce this protection or defense mechanism against the different diseases that the vaccine is for. So you have the measles, mumps, rubella, the rotavirus, smallpox, chickenpox, and the yellow fever, which come under these live vaccines. And the thing with the live vaccines, they're usually quite effective. Normally you don't need any booster doses for this. It's a long-term protection. With regards to the inactivated vaccines, these are the dead form of the organism. And what happens is they also stimulate the different components of the immune system, and you have the different protection that the body has against these different illnesses. So hepatitis A, flu, polio, and rabies. And then you have the conjugate vaccines. These conjugate vaccines, they are neither live or dead organisms, but their protein actually been extracted from these different organisms that cause the different illnesses that you are trying to vaccinate against. So the examples for the vaccines here are Haemophilus influenza vaccine, HIV, which causes pneumonia and meningitis mainly, and then you have hepatitis B, human papillomavirus, pertussis, pneumococcal, meningococcal, and of course shingles. Then you have toxoid vaccines. For this one, the toxins from the different organisms, in this case tetanus and diphtheria, they are extracted and converted into vaccine forms, which are inject the immune system and protects us against these two diseases. And of course, the final group are the mRNA vaccines, which are the COVID-19 vaccines. These are the new form of vaccines. So Dr. James will elaborate more on this later, how they are produced and how they are effective in protecting us against the COVID-19 infection. Next slide, please. Now, this is a common question some people have: what is in a vaccine? So these are the different things that actually within the vaccine, in the ampule of the vaccine that's used to inject to the people, and then to trigger off the protective mechanism or the immune system in our body. The only active ingredient is the antigen in the vaccine, and you have all these others which maintain the integrity of the vaccine. So the preservatives, they prevent contamination of the vaccines. The stabilizes the different components within the vaccine itself. They don't cross-react, or they don't react with the container or the bottle itself. Surfactant, which also maintains the integrity of the different components in the vaccine, so they don't form clumps and so forth. The different residuals from the preparation of the vaccines are in there. And diluent is the liquid form, which is sterile water, and that gives you the different concentration of the vaccine. And the adjuvants are the substances that actually potentiate the vaccines and make them more effective when they're injected into the human subject. So these are the different things that are present in the ampule of the vaccine. Now, before a vaccine is approved, it has to go through different stages or different phases. So there's no shortcut for any vaccine. So it starts off with the exploratory stage where a certain disease is identified, and then the experts will come up with the idea, okay, so this is the disease, let's develop a vaccine against it. And once they come up with the vaccine, they start by having this what we call preclinical stage, where usually animals are used, not humans, and most common the guinea pigs, the things that sometimes they use chimpanzees as well. So what they do is they trial these vaccines on animals first, and then they see the effect. And of course, the side effects, the safetiness of that vaccine that is being used. And then you come to the clinical development of the vaccine. You have three phases in this one: phase 1, 2, and 3. In phase 1, there's a smaller number of volunteers, and usually they are young and healthy people who are using this first phase. And then it goes on to phase 2, where a couple of hundred of subjects are used, and they are targeting mainly certain groups of people or certain age groups with similar characteristics, whether the children or young adults or the older folks, and they are compared against another similar group of people, which are usually called the placebo group, but they don't receive any vaccines, and they compare what the end result is and whether there's any difference or not, and if the vaccine is beneficial or not, and of course looking through the side effects as well. And then when you have phase 3 is several thousands of subjects are used, and usually different countries they do these trials, and then they see whether the vaccines are effective or not, and of course they monitor the safetiness of these vaccines at the same time. And after all this, it goes through this regulatory body. Usually, like in the States, they have FDA. So they analyze all this. They analyze the efficacy and the safetiness of these vaccines. And if all the criteria are fulfilled, then they give the approval and they tell the manufacturing companies, okay, you can start manufacturing these vaccines, and then vaccination of the human population starts. And even when the vaccination happens, quality control is also maintained by way of analyzing what's happening or what are the results during the vaccination process, as we see with the current COVID-19 vaccination process that is continuing. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Dr. Auto and Dr. Vangana. Just want to open it up before we head into the next part. If anyone had any questions, yeah, just feel free to message through. Otherwise, yeah, we'll give it maybe maybe a minute or two, and then we'll just head off to the next part if no one has any questions. We've got a question come in. People want to know, what is the Delta variant? How is that different?
Okay, maybe I should say something on that. So this coronavirus, as you know, in most of the coronavirus in human beings, like I mentioned earlier, cause only mild disease, and there are few which cause severe disease. Let me start by explaining, say, the common cold virus. The common cold virus undergoes what's called genetic shift or genetic drift. So that means slightly its genes change over time. And then it kind of essentially means there's a new strain. So this Delta variant it's the coronavirus, but there's some genetic, few gene change within the genetic material of the coronavirus. And therefore, it's not totally a new coronavirus, but a slight change. And therefore, it's called the Delta variant of this SARS-CoV-2 SARS-CoV-2. So there's some genetic change which led to a slight difference within the virus. But what is found is that this Delta strain or this Delta variant, its infectivity and transmissibility, that means how easily it is transferred from patient to patient, is much more higher than the initial coronavirus which started off the pandemic. So that's what it means, some slight genetic change which caused the new variant called the Delta variant. And these changes in genetic material of the virus just did not happen in coronavirus alone, but as I mentioned, it happened in the flu virus too. That's why you can catch a cold from one strain of flu today, get over it, maybe next year catch another cold, something like that. So that's the simple explanation of it. Dr. Vangana?
Dr. Vangana, would you like to add anything to that? That's all right. I think we're having some technical difficulties. Yeah, before we get on to the next part, just like to say, we're running on Melanesia time, so just bear with us. We are doing our best to, keep everything going in a smooth manner. So without further ado, we'll go on to part 3, specifically the COVID-19 vaccines. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll have the opportunity to talk on this. So if I can just rapidly explain how the COVID vaccine is developed. So if you look to your left, that's the same, it's a diagrammatic illustration of the virus, the coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2. So on the outside, you see the envelope with the spikes sticking out. So those spikes sticking out are like those jewels on the crown. That's why in the Latin language, we call it crown, which is in Latin, it's called corona. And therefore we call it coronavirus. So the microbiologists do have some very descriptive names for these viruses. So, but on the inside, you see the genetic material. See those coils? That's the genetic material which codes for the entire virus. When it invades a cell, this entire genetic material takes over the cellular machinery, and then it instructs this mammalian cellular machinery to produce more viruses. So that's how a virus works. But now the vaccine. So in the vaccine, the entire virus is discarded except for that bit of the genetic material, which is the RNA, is extracted from the entire virus, just that bit. And this is then placed within a lipid cell. There's a microparticle of lipid, which means fat, fat micelle. So now just bit of the genetic material, and that bit is the mRNA, which codes for just the spike proteins, just that, not the entire virus. It only codes for the spike protein. Next slide. So for AstraZeneca, that bit of the genetic material is not within a lipid particle or lipid micelle, but is in an adenovirus. This adenovirus has had its own genetic material removed and discarded, and then only the adenoviral cell, which now we put that mRNA into that adenovirus cell. So this then forms the two vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, by this lipid particle housing just this bit of the genetic material coding for the spike protein. And the adenovirus, it houses only that bit of the genetic material, not the entire coronavirus. So what this means is that lipid particle and then this casing of the adenovirus are mere vehicles which we use in order to transport the spike protein gene into the human being when we vaccinate. So just that bit is transferred. And now, next slide. So when the vaccine particle is injected into the human host, be it those lipid particles or these adenovirus particles with the genetic material in, it then enters the cell. When it enters the cell, the mRNA is read off by the cellular machinery. And because it's only the spike protein gene, it doesn't produce the entire coronavirus, but only produces the spike protein, which then go on to be expressed on the cell surface. Okay, in AstraZeneca, there is one step back, which the genetic material enters the nucleus before this mRNA is produced. And then once the mRNA is produced, it undergoes the same process as you see on your left, where the organelles produce the spike proteins. So that's the difference between these two vaccines, but the similarity is only the genetic part that codes for the spike protein of the coronavirus is used to inject into human body as vaccine, and then the human cell produces the spike proteins. Next slide. So once the spike proteins are produced, then the human cellular machinery, for instance, the antigen presenting cells, recognize this spike protein as foreign element. See those spike proteins? It's not the entire coronavirus, remember, it's only the spike protein. So it recognizes it as foreign and starts producing antibodies, like from the T cell or the B cells below. Okay, these macrophages present the spike proteins, and then it starts producing the antibodies, the other immune cells. Next slide. So those antibodies are now circulating within your body, being produced already because they recognize the spike protein. So in the event that the actual coronavirus now reaches you, the antibodies have already been prepared and they recognize the spikes, those spike proteins. And in so doing, they neutralize the virus before it multiplies rapidly in your body, or before it just totally take over the human system. So now antibodies being produced to the spike protein neutralize this virus. Next slide. Or if some human cells did get infected, remember those human cells express also the spike proteins. So the immune T killer cells then must kill off those human cells that have the virus before it spreads it to the nearby or neighboring cells of your body. So it kills the virus, or if some cell in your body has already got it, it kills the cell. This happens all the time. We all replace our cells all the time. Like your skin, it keeps shedding off and new cells come. So if there is one cell with the virus, the immune machinery clears it off and kills off that cell, but it doesn't mean it kills you. It just kills that particular cell in order to arrest and stop the growth of the virus within your system. Next slide. So I just want to show you this graph. It shows a comparative graph of those people who took the Pfizer vaccine. That's the line below. If you can, with the cursor, draw the line below. And those who are taking placebo, which is like a non-vaccine, the yellow line there. So over time, over the weeks, what you see is how many of these people or those who got COVID disease. So you see those not taking the vaccine, the numbers keep rising and rising and rising. That's the yellow line. And those who took the vaccine, the number of severe disease or number of COVID infections remains very low. So it illustrates the advantage of taking the vaccine over not taking the vaccine. Thank you. Dr. Vangana.
Thank you, Dr. James. No, so we've heard from Dr. James about the different vaccines. And of course, I'm sure we are aware of the different COVID-19 vaccines. So you have the Moderna, the Pfizer, AstraZeneca. There's also Johnson & Johnson as well, and Sinopharm, which is the Chinese one. So my question to the audience is, which one do you think is the best COVID-19 vaccine? Go to the next slide, Margaret. Well, the answer is the first vaccine that is available to you. So time is of essence here. It's getting vaccinated as soon as possible. So all these vaccines, as I've mentioned earlier on, they've gone through all this the rigorous process before they are made available to the public or to the human population. So whichever one that is approved by CDC or WHO and is available to you, that's the first vaccine that you should be taking at this time. And don't wait for another vaccine that is probably coming a little bit later to your city. And for us, it's AstraZeneca, which I'm sure a lot of the people in the Pacific Island have taken their doses as well. Next slide. These are some of the side effects of the vaccine, and it's actually similar to all the other vaccines that we normally use in our kids. So when you come to the two different groups, you have the short-term ones, which are usually mild, and they don't have any serious consequences. And then you have the more serious ones, which are usually quite rare, and they can have long-term consequences as well. So the common ones are, which are also short-term, are fever, chills, maybe pain and redness on the injection site. You might have a little bit of headache, muscle ache, fatigue, and in some cases you might have diarrhea as well. And for these mild ones, they're usually short-term, so maybe a day or two, or even up to 4 or 5 days. But some people actually, they might not have any effect at all from these vaccines. With regards to the long-term issues or complications, usually if you have anaphylaxis, which is reaction to the vaccine at the initial or the first dose, you will not be allowed to take the second dose. Again, this is very rare. And for those of you who got your vaccines, that's the reason why they observe you for the first 15 minutes after they give you the vaccine, just to see if there's any reaction that you develop. And then the one that a lot of people are concerned about is the blood clotting, which seems to be associated with the AstraZeneca vaccine. However, in some of the trials that they were doing, they say that there's no direct connection to the vaccine itself, but there could be some underlying issues that the human subjects have, which actually trigger this off. So what you actually have is what we call thrombotic thrombocytopenia syndrome. So your platelet level actually goes down, but at the same time you have this blood clotting process that's happening in your circulatory system. And in some cases of Pfizer, people who got the Pfizer vaccines, they have pericarditis and myocarditis. Again, these are very, very rare conditions. Next slide, please. Now, with regards to the blood clotting, as I said earlier on, there's no direct link with the vaccine, and the chances of actually having blood clotting is 1 in 250,000. So it's not common to have clotting when you get your vaccinations. With regards to risk of dying, the risk of dying from the vaccine, and this is similar to all the other vaccines that we give to our kids, roughly about one in a million cases. So it's very, very rare to die from these vaccines. However, if you're unvaccinated and you get COVID-19, the risk of you dying is 2%. For every 100 cases of COVID-19, you expect at least 2 people to die from the disease itself. Next slide. Now, just going through the benefits from this vaccine. Now, there are no vaccines that are 100% protective. So don't think that because we are talking about vaccines, you cannot get COVID-19. But there's no vaccine that is 100% protective. A lot of these vaccines we are using, they have about 90 or above 90, 95, 98% protection, like the Pfizer and the Moderna, whereas for the AstraZeneca, up to from 70 to 80% protection from the COVID-19 itself. However, so you have low risk of getting infection, but if you actually catch the infection, the risk of you getting severe symptoms like pneumonia, needing oxygen, or even admission to ICU is very, very, very low. So I just had a word with one of my colleagues in Sydney, who mentioned that the ICU is full of patients, COVID-19 patients who are on ventilators, and he mentioned that all of them were actually unvaccinated. There are some countries in Europe who also reported similar report as well. And actually, a specific country in Europe called Iceland, they said that after they reach their herd immunity of 75% or above in their vaccination coverage for COVID-19, their COVID ward is actually empty. And you can see the documentary on that online as well. So it's actually very, very effective. The vaccines reduce your chance of infection or getting severe infection or admission to ICU. And even the risk of you transmitting a disease is also very, very low. And for those people who like traveling, if you're fully vaccinated, you can apply for exemption from quarantine, or even if you're quarantined, the number of days is actually reduced if you are fully vaccinated. And there's also less restrictions in some countries in Europe, and of course in the US as well, where if you're fully vaccinated, the restrictions are not that tight against you if you're fully vaccinated.
Thank you, Dr. Auto and Dr. Vangana. We've had a couple questions come through, so feel free to answer. The first one was, so there was a slide. The question is, this is the question, there was a slide comparing those that received the placebo versus those taking the vaccine and the incidence of COVID. Among all of them, what was the incidence of those that had mild, moderate versus severe respiratory distress?
What's the question again? Sorry, the incidents, right?
Yeah, so well, I'll just start from the beginning. There was a slide comparing those that received the placebo
Yes.
versus those taking, Among all of
Yes.
them, what was the incidence of those that had mild, moderate versus severe respiratory distress?
Okay, if we just look at this graph itself, this is the cumulative incidence over weeks, from when the vaccine or the placebo was given. So what happens here is at day 0 or week 1, week 0, we give the vaccine or we give the placebo, and then see also after a certain time the Pfizer was given about 3 weeks later, the second dose, and then we look at like this number of people who took the Pfizer and those who just took the placebo, how many of them developed or have the COVID disease? So the number on indicator on the left is in percentage, those who have COVID disease. So initially, and to the end of the study at 16 weeks, the incidence rate for those taking Pfizer cumulatively went up to less than 0.5% of that group taking the Pfizer vaccine got the COVID-19. But the group without the vaccine or just taking the placebo, the incidence of cumulative incidence rose above 2% within the 16-week period of follow-up of those population who took the vaccine. So that's the difference. It's about approximately twice the incidence of those taking the vaccine. The placebo group is having the disease. So this trial here just shows, it does not show like those catching the COVID, the information is not available in this graph, which percentage of them has severe COVID disease, and percentage of these Pfizer vaccinated people who have severe. But in all the trials done so far, it shows that the vaccinated group, if they do like this less than 0.5% incidence rate, if they do catch the virus, but they don't develop the severe form of COVID disease. But I can't give you that information just from this slide. There was one question which I saw flicker about how much of these vaccines have been given. We have, like worldwide, the vaccine has been given from December of 2020 up till now. So already about 5.6 billion doses of the vaccine has been given. So the states, the Maldives, United Arab Emirates, Maldives and the United Arab Emirates are actually almost 100% of their eligible population has been vaccinated. And the US has reached 50% and over. But total of 5.9, or was it 6 billion, almost 6 billion doses of the vaccine has been given. And during this experience over this 9-month to 10-month period, we have not witnessed any any deaths from the vaccine, from the 5.9 billion vaccines given. There's been no deaths. The safety profiles have been good. So we have
just to add to, sorry, James, just to add to what James is saying. So according to the latest numbers, so James is right, up about 5.53 billion doses have been given of the vaccines, and for those who are fully vaccinated, it's about 2.2 billion, which means that 28.2% of the world population is now vaccinated. So when you talk about herd immunity, we are a long way off from that. So, and if you narrow it down to the Pacific Islands, our numbers are actually very low at the moment, very poor. So roughly about, I think for Vanuatu we're 3%. Solomon is also about 3%. I don't know about Fiji. It's about 30%, is it? James can correct me on that.
Fiji, we are a bit better than state of Victoria. Okay. Actually, our percentage for first dose vaccination is we've reached 80, and the second dose we are now up to 60%. Okay.
Yeah, and there's only very few countries that have reached 75% or above. So United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Singapore, Malta, those are some of the very few countries who have, and of course Iceland, the one I mentioned earlier on, they've actually reached their herd immunity. And I also saw on the news that Singapore are planning to reopen their borders with other countries as well. But for us, we are still a long way off from those numbers.
Okay, thank you guys. We've got a couple of questions, but we'll save them for the final question time. So we'll head to our final part. Part 4, conspiracy theories and myths. So I'll leave it to the experts. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Isaac, for that. So this is an interesting component of the presentation. The conspiracy theories that people have, and there are hundreds of them, but I'll just put up the 4 main ones there. Microchip. They said that there's microchip in the vaccines, and they also said that the vaccines can actually change your DNA or your character. And then they were talking about the mark of the beast, which is in the vaccine. And the 4th one is the uncleanliness of the vaccine. And they said that it's evil to actually get this vaccine because of this. Now, I presented earlier on what's actually in the vaccine, and it's hard to comprehend to say that there's microchip in the vaccines. How can that a microchip can be put into the vaccine when you go through all these different protocols or rigorous processes where there's no, it's not possible to insert microchip into the vaccines. And how will a microchip actually pass through a needle going into a human subject? It's also unbelievable to comprehend that. So this is actually a conspiracy theory that people have, and they even talk about magnet as well associated with the microchip, and your characters will be in the microchip as well. But as I said, there's no way that a microchip can be inserted into the vaccine. They talk about the vaccine changing your DNA. Now, we went through quite a lot about how the vaccine works, and mainly it's to do with your mRNA protein and the spike proteins. I can't hear Dr. James saying that it actually changes your DNA. And most of these mRNA proteins or mRNA, the vaccines that we were talking about, they only change they only trigger off the body's reaction within the cytoplasm, not in the nucleus, but within the cytoplasm of the cell, to cause the reaction of the body to produce the specific antibodies and cell in protecting a human subject. So there's no way that this mRNA or the spike protein will actually change the character of the human being. That is just not possible. Talking about, I'll leave the mark of the beast as last. The unclean, they said that the vaccine is unclean. These vaccines are all purified, as I mentioned earlier on. Those are the contents of what's in the vaccine, and they are maintained by the preservatives. They are maintained and they are clean. There's nothing unclean about it. They are all purified, and these preservatives actually preserve them, and all those other components I mentioned, they maintain the integrity of the vaccine. So I just want to explain in that area. And the mark of the beast is one, and a lot of church followers of Christians believe this, which is actually quite amazing. And I feel that that's actually a misinterpretation of the Bible. You need to go back to the Bible and read again Revelation 13 and 14 and the parallel verses, text or Bible text to remove that thinking that it's actually the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast is, if you interpret the Bible correctly, it's not a literal thing. It's not a material thing that can be injected into your body. It's your allegiance, your belief to somebody that you want to follow. So really, you need to go back to the Bible and understand it a bit better. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are some. I'll leave you with some of these advices for those of us who like going into this the internet. Just Google something and something comes out and you just believe it, and in the end you are misled by it. So conspiracy theories, let me tell you that they are based on opinions and not facts. There's no scientific evidence to support these conspiracy theories. Now, I've always checked where these conspiracy theories come from, and I've never seen a single medical scientist who are actually conspiracy theories. Medical scientists are different from doctors, so don't mistake, don't confuse them. All right, so they are based on opinions that people have. All right, so you have to be careful what you read on the internet. Nowadays, because of internet, we have a lot of Google scientists and Google doctors. Just because they see something on the internet, they take it as truth. But not everything that you read are actually true. So what I would like to encourage you to do is, when you see something speculated around, or when you read something on a website, just check where the website is coming from. All right. And the other thing is, check the author of that website. You will find out that they all come from these anti-vaccination campaign groups, and run by anti-vaccination conspiracy groups worldwide. So you have to be really careful on that. Check the website first, and also check who are the authors of that website, and don't just take anything that is being presented to you. Now, from myself, I usually just look at CDC and WHO. Those are the genuine websites where a lot of the medical scientists use, and they dispatch the information to CDC and WHO, and that is how WHO is a more reliable entity or website for you to look into. Now, with regards to even some of the media that impart information can be a little bit tricky as well. But the two well-known mainstream media worldwide, where a lot of people watch, the CNN and BBC, and they are usually quite transparent. These two groups of media, CNN and BBC. Of course, we have others closer to us from Australia, like ABC, Channel 9, and all those. They are also reliable ones. But there are some media groups in Europe and in US where they're actually promoting anti-vaccination messages. So you have to be careful which one you go through or you read into. Also, regarding the Bible, as I mentioned earlier on, in relation to the mark of the beast, you must read and understand your Bible properly so that you are not being misled by somebody.
That I believe that's the end of part 4. So we're going to open it up to question time. We do have some questions lined up from the previous section, so we'll start with those. So the first one is, what happens when you're exposed to the coronavirus at the same time or immediately after being vaccinated?
What's the question again?
Sorry, the question is, what happens when you're exposed to the virus at the same time or immediately after being vaccinated?
Okay, maybe I can say a word on that. So the development of immunity does take some time. So currently, like once you've had the second dose of the vaccine, and 2 weeks after that, we consider is the period in which you further boost the immunity after the second dose. So what this means is the hugest or largest potential for being immune is from 2 weeks and beyond the second dose of the vaccine. The first dose, you get some recognition by your immune system of the virus. You get the beginnings of building up the immune response. And then the second dose further boosts up your immunity. And 2 weeks from the second dose and onwards, you would be considered immune. So remember, these vaccines are developed to produce 2 kinds of efficacy. So don't worry about the big word efficacy, which means effectiveness. So one is effectiveness against invasion by the bug, the virus or the bacteria. So this is actually preventive, that the bug cannot enter you at all. So there's some examples of that. For instance, like if you've had the measles vaccine, it's very unlikely that you will have measles. So in fact, your immune system totally neutralizes the invading measles before you get measles. So that's like preventive. Now, there's other vaccines which its efficacy is towards severe disease. So yes, you do catch the virus, but its effectiveness is that it will prevent you from going into severe forms of the disease, and then you succumb or one dies. So if I have a mild disease, then I can deal with it. So the vaccine helps the immune system that way in order to mediate and to reduce the severity of the disease. So thus far, what we observe in terms of the COVID vaccines is that it helps you so that even if you do contract the virus, it reduces the severity of the COVID-19 disease in you. So far, I think if I just quickly go off from memory, recalling back another program like this, the deaths in what we find in our nation here in Fiji is majority of those, and it was estimated that 80% of the deaths were in people who were non-immune. So non-immune means they have not taken the vaccine, or they contracted the disease within only the first dose of the vaccine being given. So what this good advice is, once you have the first dose of the vaccine, don't think you are Rambo, you are anything goes. No, do protect yourself with some masks, you know, and distancing, social distancing, and do avoid the bug getting to you, even after you've taken the first dose of vaccine. And after the second dose, again, it doesn't mean that, okay, now I've got the second dose, I can pretty much do what I want. No, don't have that attitude. But do have the other protective measures as well: masking, washing of hands, distancing. Don't cough into someone else's face, or they cough into you, and you thinking that, okay, I'm already immune. No, do exercise the protection mechanisms along with that vaccine. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Auto. So next question was, when COVID first broke out, why did it affect the developed nations more than the developing nations?
Yes, this is due to travel. The volume of travel between, say, the States and China, Europe and China, and rest of Southeast Asia with China was, of course, higher than, say, between Honiara and China. And therefore, like the rapidity and the bulk of the spread is happening within those nations which have higher frequency of contact through traveling. That's why the distribution of the disease was like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Auto. I might ask this question to Dr. Vangana. So why are Solomon Islander medical professionals refusing the vaccine? Well, it's not just Solomon Islander medical professionals. I guess it's a lot of medical professionals all over the Pacific. So I hear because of no jab, no job is taken as an order rather than a choice. So would you be able to kind of explain why some might some medical professionals might be weary of the vaccine?
That's a very, very good question. In fact, somebody raised that. He said it is because the medical professionals are divided. That is why the world is divided too. You know, there's a certain group that wants to be vaccinated, and the other group said even the medical professionals too are divided. So for us too, we don't want to take the vaccine. Now, this is again based on their own opinion of the medical professionals. As I've said earlier on, I have yet to read a medical scientist coming up with the idea that the vaccines are not non-effective, or they have the microchips and so forth. So again, it's based on personal opinion. Now, the thing is this: in medicine, we always believe on medical science, what is proven by medical science. All right, so you look at the different medicines we are using. For example, amoxil. Amoxil is proven by medical science that it's an antibiotic, and we can use it to treat pneumonia and infection and skin infection and so forth. That is proven by medical science. The other vaccines that we use in children also were proven by medical science. The COVID vaccines that we just talked about were also proven by medical science, the whole process that I went through. So there is enough evidence to say that the vaccines are actually working. All right. One of the main issues that has come about why people don't believe on the vaccine is having to do with Christian values that people have. And I've heard of doctors who are believing, who seem to be dragged onto this as well. And in the Pacific, most of the population in the Pacific are Christians, and probably that's one of the reasons why they do that. But I feel that it's more an opinion than medical science proving that these vaccines are not working.
Yeah, maybe I just also speak to that. I think one of the reasons why, particularly in the Solomons, we also have it here in Fiji, some professionals refused the vaccine, was this idea of choice. My own opinion is, if these practitioners examine the scientific data, then the scientific data would rebel against their perceived opinions on the vaccine, because it's clearly proven there. And then if you want to overthrow it, you should do some research. But I suspect that this idea of choice, of freedom, which is a big American word, liberty, that's what comes into it. But I think that is an overrated thing within maybe, if I may, I'll just use Solomon Islands because I'm from there too. So maybe like it's purely overrated, this idea of freedom of choice, because this is what happens. Nobody abrogates your freedom. No one. So now, if like in the health system, the government or the Ministry of Health says, all of you need to have the vaccine, it's for a reason. This is a policy statement. So the reason is twofold. One is we need all our health staff protected, so that in the event of the pandemic reaching our shores, all health staff will be protected and be able to manage the health work should sick people come in. So that's one. And two is, like, it's possible that I, as a health personnel, refuse the vaccine. And so now if I have the COVID virus, I'll be transmitting it to my patient. You know? So that's the reason why this government policy is in, to ensure that all health staff should be vaccinated. So perhaps it's trying to enforce that a bit, because like children, we sometimes do not listen, and say, therefore it's trying to enforce that. But it does not abrogate your right of freedom of choice under the Constitution. If you have some issues with this government policy, you have avenues to contest this. So you take the matter to the High Court, to the Supreme Court. Don't stand there crying foul. You know, that's, if you are truly concerned about your freedom of choice, well, contest it. I don't see any reason why you should be like, okay, I'm gonna cry foul and I'm gonna do this now and this and this. Well, if it's the government owning that hospital, that's its house, or that clinic, that's its house. So like the parent, it sets some rules. So in government, that's called policies. So it sets some policies. And I'm the child in this house, I should submit to the policies. If I don't, then okay, I'll go and contest this. But certainly this is not my hospital. That's not my clinic, so that I will override what the Ministry of Health is saying. No, that's not my hospital. No. So that's the way I view it. You know, like if we examine the scientific data, it's clear that vaccine should be taken. Therefore, the refusal by health staff to take this vaccine is not due to the scientific data. The refusal by health staff to take it is purely personal, and whether it's due to my perception of my rights being taken away from me, well, I should be man enough to contest for my rights. That's my view of it. Thank you.
Thank you, both Dr. Vangana and Dr. Uto, for the very, very elaborate answers. Really appreciate it, you know. Yeah, speechless. So going to our next question. What is the advice for those believing natural / traditional medicines can kill the virus, and how has this affected your day-to-day dealings with individuals, like, you know, advocating for the vaccinations?
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I'll answer that, and of course, Dr. James can also add his view on that. So now, I was brought up in a culture where they use a lot of traditional medicines back in my village. So they usually scrape this the bark of trees to treat diarrhea. All right, and this coconut husk, you boil the coconut husk and the water from the coconut husk. They use it for cleansing as well, and even some traditional herbs for malaria. Now, the only concern for these traditional medicines is that they don't have any scientific background. Like, we don't know whether what they have in those herbal medicines are actually effective until they are scientifically proven. Like all the medicines that we use for the medical things we use in the area of medicine, in the medical profession, are all scientifically proven, and then we say, okay, because we have the data said it's effective, the risks are very small, you can use them. For the herbal medicine, what normally happens, they were used from our ancestors long time ago, and they said, oh, this one is effective against. Of course, some of them might be effective, but we just need to, you know, go through the process of scientifically proving them that they are actually effective against certain diseases. And no exception for COVID-19. My worry is that the COVID-19 is spreading, the spread of COVID-19 is really fast at the moment, and it's killing so many people. So my advice is probably you should base your data or the effectiveness of whatever you're using on something that is scientifically proven, and not just picking up traditional medicine somewhere and then using it. Because we don't know whether they're actually effective against COVID-19 or not. And the thing that, because you are using this traditional medicine, okay, somebody says it's effective against COVID-19, then you are going to mislead everybody else. All right. I heard somewhere in PhD for a long time ago that somebody said that they had the cure for AIDS or HIV, and really that wasn't true. So don't believe whatever people come up with and say this one is effective against this disease, this one is effective against this disease. For me as a medical professional, I will always believe what is scientifically proven to be effective, and I will go for that.
Thank you, Dr. Vangana. Dr. Auta, would you like to have any extra words on that?
Yeah, like Dr. Vangana has said, the summary of it is that those traditional medicines have never been trialed in any scientific research against this COVID-19 disease. So since it's not being trialed, we don't know its effectiveness, one, and we don't know its safety within the human subject. So I think what we don't know, we should be wary about, but we should look for trialed and tested treatments for COVID-19. This is like a bit extraordinary time we are in, extraneous times, and the whole of scientific community is trying to work rapidly in order to develop treatments. Trials are being done and fulfilling the criteria which then those medicines can be believable by the intellectual community. But where we don't really know, I think it's best to stick away, because you don't know the safety profile of those custom treatments. Maybe they are entirely harmless, those traditional medicines. But at the same time as they are entirely harmless, maybe they are also entirely non-effective. So then it doesn't do you any good. It's not harmless, but it's not effective either. So those are the two things we look for. The best medicine is zero side effect and 100% effective against that bug. So if you found that, that's the best medicine, but it has to go through rigorous trials in order to get there to find that such a medicine. Most times we have many medicines which are effective against the disease, but also have some side effects against oneself. So we weigh the benefit and we weigh the cons against that medicine, and then I might say that 9 times out of 10 I'll be alive once I take this medicine, or I might say that 9 times out of 10 I'll be dead. So then I know which one to choose. which medicine to choose. So that's the kind of work we need to know in order to know how safe the medicine is, how effective it is. Thank you.
Thank you, both Dr. Vangana and Dr. Uto. Basically, trust the process, guys. So next question. Referring back to the myths and the conspiracy slides, there's been a lot of talk about getting a third dose. Should we be expecting that soon?
Okay, thank you. So at the moment, according to the trials that's happening, only 2 doses are recommended. And I just saw as well that the developers of the AstraZeneca vaccine said that the 3rd dose is not necessary at the moment the result of the trials actually come out. Now, I was watching the news on the CNN as well, that there's a lot of confusion in the States as well, where the CDC said the 2 doses, and then the administration, the president's administration said 3 doses. So that created a little bit of confusion. But I think the thing is, we are still trialing. You know, COVID-19 is a new disease, and the vaccines too are new. So as the vaccination is continuing, the trials too are continuing. So we don't know yet for sure whether you actually need 3rd dose or not. But the current recommendation is only 2 doses, especially for the AstraZeneca vaccine.
Thank you, Dr. Vangana. Just the next question, sorry. Just trying to load it up here. If I have an underlying sickness, is the vaccine my friend or is it my enemy?
Yeah. Okay. This question has been. It's a very good question. But what we have seen is those who have, in terms of the COVID, so those who have underlying conditions, so maybe heart conditions or diabetes, or have some lung conditions, those who have these underlying conditions, if they do get the COVID, the disease, there is higher risk of them dying. So then having an underlying disease poses more risk for you when you if you do catch the COVID-19. Okay, then these vaccines have also been trialed within those populations too. And the safety profile in, for instance, one question which arose was, how about pregnant women? How about women, people with cardiac disease? How about people with, so trials have also, those trials have also included some people in those groups. And over this 9 to 10 months we have worldwide done this vaccination, it has also included some heart patients, some diabetics, some other lung conditions. And the vaccine has not caused any deterioration within their underlying disease. So in fact, it's safer. Even should I have diabetes, that I should go and have the vaccine. It's safe, just like maybe a juvenile diabetic child, I will give him the tetanus vaccine if he needs it. So safety profile in different diseases, the more information coming that the vaccine is safe. At the same time, we weigh that when the disease strikes those with underlying lung conditions, they're more likely to get severe illness and can succumb to the disease.
Right, just to add on to what Dr. James said, so definitely this vaccine is your friend if you have an underlying medical condition. Now, the only absolute contraindication that I know of is if you have a live vaccine, all right, and if you have a disease like HIV, where there's a little bit of risk taking a live vaccine, and the COVID-19 vaccines they are not live vaccines. We've explained it clearly before. They are protein, the mRNA protein source, and the only live vaccines are the ones we normally give to the babies, like MMR vaccines. So really, for COVID-19, vaccination is definitely your best friend at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you, doctors. So that's going to be our last question of the night. Thank you, all you beautiful Melanesians and everyone, just for coming through and, being great. So if you have any further questions or queries, don't hesitate to email us. We've dropped the email in the comment section, or even just message us on Instagram. We appreciate you all for the questions. Everyone's pressing out for all this divisive community that we're in at the moment. So we hope we have provided a bit of clarity. But yeah, don't hesitate to reach out. Don't be shy. Thank you all for coming. Do you have any last messages from our doctors? I'll begin with you, Dr. Uto.
Yes, my message is I've had 2 vaccines, 2 doses of the vaccine already. So I've had it now for since in May I had it, and then the second, in April, and then the second dose sometime in June, July. I can't quite remember because, but I did fulfill the time interval between the 2 vaccines. And every 4th day, I test for COVID. And I walk into the COVID section of the hospital because I had to see some patients there. I wear protective clothing, but I also believe, and from the studies, that this vaccination protected me. Every day 4, I test for the virus, whether I've got it. And over this month since April, now in the middle of this epidemic, I've always tested negative. So my advice and my the trustful advice to you is that please do take the vaccine. It protects. If you get the severe gets COVID, it won't be so severe, and you will overcome the disease. Thank you.
Okay, from me, just final comments. Just want to reassure everyone that whatever Dr. James and myself talk about, they are not our own opinions in terms of the COVID vaccines or the other vaccines. They are scientifically researched, and they are all based on evidence medicine. My other comment is for those of you who believe on all these conspiracy theories, there's a saying. It says, it's very easy to be fooled, but it is so difficult to be convinced that you are fooled. So, sometimes I think reading between the lines or whatever, always cross-check whatever information you get, and always, if you are a medical profession, always stick to medical science as your tool to guide you, and then that will also help people who who are next to you or who are listening to you to convince them what is the right decision to make. Now, like James, I also had my 2 doses of AstraZeneca. And guess what? No side effects from day one, no side effects at all up to now. So this side effect thing is an individual response to the vaccine itself. But the most serious ones, the most serious side effects are very rare to have, and the milder ones, individuals may have it, but it's only for a short period of time. So, and it's just a matter of the risk, benefits. If the benefits outweigh the risk, it's better to go for the vaccine and get most of the benefits or all the benefits that we've talked about earlier on. So I hope that our presentation will sort of remove some of these doubts regarding COVID-19 and the vaccination. And if you need further information on this, we can always communicate through this media in days or months or years to come. Thank you.
Yep, thank you everyone for tuning in to the Our Melanesia COVID information session. We hope you've enjoyed it, and I want to wish you a great night, and yeah, thank you so much. Take care, everyone.